One late night message exposed a multi-year plot to steal my future and crush my family's trust beyond repair. My name's Ethan Moore. I'm 29 years old, and until last month, I thought my family was well, not perfect, but functional. I live in Portland, Oregon, work as a project coordinator at a small architecture firm, and spend most of my free time running along the Willamette River. That illusion cracked open at 2:47 a.m. when my phone buzzed on the night, and it was a message from my cousin Lee, short and frantic. "Ethan, you need to see this before she deletes it. Check your email now." Still half asleep, I stumbled into my kitchen, made coffee, and opened my laptop. There was one unread email from Lee, subject line, about Aunt Karen. The attachment was a PDF scan of a notarized document. My stomach dropped when I saw the title, Addendum to the Last Will and Testament of Margaret Moore. That was my late grandmother. She'd passed 2 years ago, leaving behind her modest estate, including her old house in Salem that had been in the family for decades. According to the will I knew about, the house was supposed to be sold, and the proceeds, around $320,000, split equally between my father, Aunt Karen, and me. But this addendum completely rewrote that. In it, Grandma supposedly left the entire house to Aunt Karen. No split. No discussion. Just one neat signature at the bottom, one I instantly recognized looked wrong. My hands were shaking as I scrolled down, my mind racing. Aunt Karen and I weren't especially close, but I'd never imagined her doing something this calculated. I tried calling Lee immediately, but she didn't pick up. That's when I noticed the second page. A scribbled note in blue pen. Found this in Dad's desk after he passed. "She doesn't know I have it. Be careful, she's not who you think she is." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By sunrise, I'd already planned to drive to Salem to confront Aunt Karen. I needed answers. But when I pulled into her driveway at 8:15 a.m., something was already off. Her car was gone, the blinds were closed, an A for sale sign stood on the lawn. She wasn't planning to talk. She was planning to disappear. I slammed my car door and just stood there for a second, staring at the for sale sign like it was mocking me. The grass was overgrown, a few newspapers sat soggy on the porch. She hadn't been here in weeks. I pulled out my phone and called my dad. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy. "Ethan, it's 8 in the morning. What's going on?" "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you know Aunt Karen is selling Grandma's house?" There was a long pause. Too long. I thought we agreed not to stir this up again. He finally said, "Stir this up, Dad. She's selling our inheritance. Then I just saw her will addendum that." "Stop. That paper Lee found, you can't prove anything. Your aunt has every legal right to that house now." I froze. "You knew?" The sigh on the other end sounded heavy, but not guilty. He resigned. "It's complicated, Ethan. Your grandmother made choices. Let them be." The call ended before I could say more. My own father was defending her. I drove to Lee's place in West Salem, where she lived in a cramped apartment above a bakery. She opened the door before I could knock, pulling me inside. "You saw it, right?" she asked, eyes darting toward the hallway. "Yeah, and Dad's siding with her." Lee bit her lip, then shoved a shoebox across the table. Inside were manila envelopes, receipts, and what looked like pages torn from a check register. "She's been funneling money from Grandma's account since before she died," Lee whispered. "Look at $1,200 here, $3,500 there, always in cash withdrawals, and the handwriting on the addendum. I found a stack of old cards from Grandma. Her signature never looked like that." I picked up one of the receipts, a wire transfer to an account in Palm Springs, California for $8,000, dated just 6 months before Grandma passed. Before I could say anything, Lee's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her face drained of color. "It's her," she mouthed. She put the call on speaker. "Lee," Aunt Karen's voice came sharp through the line. "We need to talk, and you need to keep Ethan out of this, or you're going to regret it." Lee's eyes shot to mine. "Why?" Lee asked, her voice shaking. "Because," Karen said after a beat, "there's more you don't know, and if it comes out, this family will never recover." The line went dead, and in that instant I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about a secret big enough to burn the entire Moore family to the ground. Lee and I sat there in silence for a full minute after the call ended, the hum of the bakery's fridge downstairs the only sound. My coffee had gone cold, but my pulse felt like it was boiling. "What could she possibly mean by that?" I asked. Lee shook her head. "I don't know, but she sounded scared, and Karen doesn't scare easily." I sorted through the shoebox again, my fingers brushing over a folded photograph at the bottom. It was old Cibitone showing my grandmother in front of the Salem house. But she wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a man I didn't recognize, holding a small baby. "That's not Grandpa," I said, pointing at the man. "No," Lee said, "it's not." We both looked at each other. My grandmother had been married to my grandfather for over 50 years, at least as far as anyone knew. So who was this? Before we could dive deeper, a knock rattled the apartment door. 3 sharp raps. Lee froze. "That's not the landlord," she whispered. I went to the peephole and felt my stomach twist. Standing in the dim hallway was Uncle Rob, Karen's ex-husband. He hadn't been part of family gatherings for over a decade after their divorce, but there he was, looking older, heavier, and holding a brown envelope. "Ethan," he said when I opened the door, "we need to talk somewhere private now." Lee hesitated, but I nodded and followed him down the hall to the parking lot. He didn't waste time. "I heard Karen selling the house," Rob said, glancing around like we were being watched. "You should know, she's not doing this for herself. She owes someone a lot." "How much?" I asked. He licked his lips. "About $200,000. Some shady business investment in Palm Springs went south. She promised the house as collateral. If she doesn't sell soon, they'll come after her." "And the fake will?" I pressed. He gave me a tight look. "Let's just say she's done worse than that to keep her secrets. Your grandma, she found out something years ago, and Karen made sure it stayed buried." I was about to ask what he meant when he shoved the brown envelope into my hands. "Everything you need in there, but be careful, Ethan. Once you know, you cannot know." Then he walked off, leaving me standing by my car under the wee Gorgon sun. I tore open the envelope. Inside were photocopies of legal documents, a birth certificate and a paternity test result dated 1994. My name wasn't on it, but my father's was. And under child's name, it didn't say Ethan Moore. It said Lee Carter. For a moment, my brain refused to connect the dots. Lee, my cousin, listed as my father's daughter. I read the document again, scanning the stamp date, the lab address in Eugene, the 99.99% probability. There was no mistaking it. By the time I got back upstairs, Lee was pacing her tiny kitchen, chewing at her nails. "What did he give you?" I handed her the papers without a word. She sat, read the first page, and then just stopped. Her lips moved like she was trying to speak, but no sound came out. This is saying," she finally whispered. "That my dad is your father, I finished for her." She dropped the papers like they burned her. "That can't be right, my mom and your dada." She cut herself off, eyes widening. The air between us felt suddenly heavy, thick with years of unasked questions. "Lee, did your mom ever mention?" I started. "No," she said quickly, too quickly. Then softer, "But I always wondered why Aunt Karen hated me. She treated me like I didn't belong in the family." I sank into the chair opposite her, my pulse pounding in my ears. If this is true, then Grandma knew. Then maybe that's what Karen was hiding her, because if this came out, she'd be exposed as what? Covering for Mom, for Dad. Lee's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. "You're getting too close. Stop digging, or the money and the truth will both vanish." We stared at the message until it blurred. "I'm not stopping," I said finally. "Karen forged the will. She's selling the house to pay off her debt, and now we find out our family tree's been rewritten." Lee looked at me with something between fear and determination. "Then we need proof that will hold up in court, and I think I know where to get it." "Where?" She took a shaky breath. "Grandma's old safe. Karen never had the combination, but I do, and it's still in the basement of the Salem house. One problem, the house had a new lock, the realtor's number on the sign, and Karen could show up at any moment." Still, that afternoon, we drove back to the empty house. The neighborhood was quiet, the blinds still drawn. Lee pulled a bobby pin from her hair and went to work on the side door's lock like she'd done it 100 times. We slept inside. The smokes floated in the stale air. The living room still smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. And in the basement, Lee crossed to a metal safe bolted into the wall. She spun the dial, left, right, left, and the latch clicked open. Inside was a single manila folder labelled in Grandma's shaky handwriting, "For Ethan, if anything happened." I reached for it. And that's when we heard a car door slam upstairs. Lee's eyes went wide. "That's her," she mouthed. I froze, folder still in my hands, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Footsteps creaked above us, slow, deliberate. The sound of someone who knew they weren't supposed to be there, but didn't care. Lee motioned for me to tuck the folder under my jacket. We killed the basement light, crouching behind an old bookshelf stacked with paint cans. From upstairs came the unmistakable jingle of keys being tossed onto the counter, then Karen's voice, low but sharp, like she was talking to herself. Stupid kids, always sticking their noses where they don't belong. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from an unknown number. "If you're in the house, get out. She's not alone." I glanced at Lee. She shook her head, mouthing ignore it. Then the basement door opened. Light spilled down the stairs, and Karen's silhouette appeared, flanked by a tall figure, a man in a dark windbreaker. His voice was deep and familiar. "You said they'd be here," he muttered. "They are," Karen replied. "They wouldn't let this go." The man's footsteps were heavy on the stairs. He carried something metallic. I caught a glint under the bare bulb. Lee grabbed my hand, squeezing hard. Karen reached the bottom first, scanning the basement. Her gaze swept past us, then came back, narrowing. "Ethan, Lee, come out, now." I stepped forward, folder still hidden under my jacket. "What is this, Karen? Who's your friend?" She smiled without warmth. "Someone who makes problems go away. And you too, you've become a problem." The man shifted closer, blocking the stairs. I realized in that instant we weren't just dealing with family betrayal, this was about survival. Lee's voice trembled, but stayed steady. Grandma left this for Ethan, she said, pointing to my jacket. If you lay a hand on us, it's going to the police. Karen's eyes darkened. You think the police will save you? That folder is exactly why you won't go to them. I took a step back, keeping my eyes on her. What's in here, Karen? Her lips curved into the smallest smirk. Everything you were never meant to know about your father, and about Lee's mother. It's not just about the will anymore, Ethan, it's about who you really are. And before I could respond, the man in the windbreaker lunged for me. I ducked instinctively, the man's arm grazing my shoulder as he tried to grab the folder. Lee didn't hesitate. She snatched a rusted wrench from the shelf and swung it hard. The clang echoed in the basement, and the man staggered back, cursing. Karen screamed, "Idiot, don't hurt them here." I bolted for the stairs, folder still under my jacket. Lee was right behind me. We burst into the kitchen, shoving past a stack of moving boxes, and tore out the back door into the yard. My heart pounded as we sprinted toward the driveway. Karen's voice carried through the air. "Ethan, you open that and you wish you were never born." We dove into my car, and I peeled out of the driveway, gravel spitting against the fenders. Neither of us spoke until we were halfway back to Portland, lungs burning. Finally, Lee said, "Open it, now." I pulled into a deserted rest stop off an NS5 and cut the engine. My hand shook as I opened the folder. Inside were a stack of old letters written in Grandma's handwriting, a bank ledger showing large withdrawals tied to Karen's name, and a sealed envelope with my name printed on the front in Grandma's shaky script. I tore it open. Inside was a single handwritten page. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means Karen has finally done what I feared. You must know that the man who raised you is not your father. The truth is in the safety deposit box at First Willamette Bank, keys in the envelope." A small brass key clinked into my palm. My throat went dry. Lee's voice was barely a whisper. "So you're not?" I shook my head slowly, my entire sense of self tilting. "Apparently not." The letters in the folder painted a darker picture. Grandma had confronted Karen years ago about both the paternity lies and the financial theft. Karen had promised to handle it quietly, which clearly meant forging documents and erasing evidence. But if the truth was in that safety deposit box, it meant there was still one piece of the puzzle Karen hadn't destroyed. "We go tomorrow," I said, tucking the key into my pocket. Lee frowned. "What if she's watching the bank?" I met her eyes. "Then we make sure she's watching something else." The problem was, Karen had already shown she was willing to use more than just threats to shut us up, and something told me she wouldn't wait for tomorrow to make her next move. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in my apartment made me think Karen had found me. By dawn, I decided we couldn't risk walking into the bank alone. We needed a witness who wouldn't be intimidated. I called my friend Marcus, a paralegal who owed me a favor. "Meet us at First Willamette at 10, I told him. "Bring your work badge and your phone camera, and Marcus, don't ask questions yet." Lee and I arrived early, parking across the street. Sure enough, Karen's silver Lexus was nowhere in sight, but a black SUV sat idling 2 spaces from the bank entrance. The driver wore sunglasses and didn't look our way, but my gut said he wasn't here for the view. Marcus strolled up at exactly 10, flashing his badge at the teller like he was on official business. We followed him to the vault room, my hands clammy around the small brass key. The safety deposit box slid out smoothly. Inside was a thick envelope labelled "Final Truth." My stomach turned as I opened it. The first document was a notarized statement, Grandma's, dated 6 months before her death. It detailed Karen's embezzlement from the family accounts, her forged will, and the final blow were the real paternity results. According to the certified DNA report inside, my biological father wasn't my dad at all, it was Uncle Rob. I almost laughed from the sheer absurdity. Rob, the man who'd warned me, was my actual father. He'd been cut out of my life because of Karen's lies, all to keep control over Grandma's money and the family narrative. There were also copies of wire transfer records proving Karen's $200,000 debt to the Palm Springs investors and a signed letter from those same people threatening to expose her unless she paid up. "This is enough to bury her," Marcus said quietly, snapping photos. "We could take this straight to the DA." We stepped out of the vault and Karen was standing there, her face pale, lips tight. "Hand it over, Ethan," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "You don't understand what you're playing with." I looked her in the eye. "No, Karen, you don't understand it, it's over." Marcus hit send on his phone. "Everything's already backed up," he told her. "Even if you walk out with that folder, the DA has it now." For the first time, Karen looked small, defeated. She turned and walked out without another word, the SUV outside roaring to life as she climbed in. 2 weeks later, the house was taken off the market. The forged will was voided. Karen was indicted on multiple charges, and the $320,000 was split exactly as Grandma had intended. Lee and I sat on the porch of the Salem house one last time before it sold. She handed me a cold beer. "So you gonna call Rob?" I stared out at the street, the summer air heavy with the smell of cut grass. "Yeah," I said finally. "It's time to start telling the truth for once in this family's life."